What haunts your character? Is there something that's happened to them, or have they done something that's affected their beliefs, their behaviors, values, and even motives? The character wound has often been called the character ghost, and for good reason. It's a thing, some sort of action or event that follows your character, having a pervasive influence over their actions and the course of their arc. Guilt, grievance, grief, and gravity, the four categories that make up your character ghost and give added depth to their backstory. Today, we're going to explore how grief can not just make for a powerful motivator, but also how it can develop your character's backstory and future actions.
And she was different. I mean, I think we all were. But I just wanted to be with them. I wanted to hold them.
The Leftovers. I've been wanting to talk about this TV show for a while now. And I should say I have no clue if this show has a following or if people have even seen it recently, or if anybody even cares about it now at all. So this video could bomb, but what the hell? The Leftovers is quite possibly my favorite TV show of all time. I'm going to show some restraint and try to stay on topic, specifically to how grief plays an important role in just about every character's life and how it's impacted their arc. And specifically, I want to use the topic of grief and explore it and how it was effective at creating a powerful character wound. And quite honestly, I don't think I could use a better TV show as a sort of case study for this. Before we talk about The Leftovers and how grief plays an important role, I want to establish sort of the basics around grief and how, in the context of the character's ghost, this acts as an interesting literary device. More often than not, this is going to be something a character is going to have to overcome. It does not play as much of an active role in your character's life, such as grievance or guilt might. And in both of those other cases, our characters are likely actively taking steps to do something, to overcome, or acting in tandem with those emotional states. But grief has a bit more of a passive effect. It's something that your character sort of subtly overcomes and copes with. So, as our example, in The Leftovers, there is an event that happens at the very start, the rapture. It essentially causes the disappearance of about 2% of the world's population. Overall, the people left behind, the leftovers, are all in some state of collective mourning in one way or another. On a global level, the theme of grief is played out across the entire world. Everyone is mourning the loss of somebody or something, or just the fact that they were left behind in this event. This shared trauma and how each of the characters deals with this grief is played out across a wide range of characters and perspectives. Specifically, though, in the wake of this event, the rapture, a cult is formed called the Guilty Remnant that acts a bit like a home base for all of that grieving. Added to this, there's something very symbolic about the remnant, with all of its members taking this sort of vow of silence, making them quite literally unable to move on or even talk about their own grieving process. This is a very symbolic representation of unresolved grief. Their main mission is to continue to remind people of the rapture and remind the leftovers of everyone that has left, regardless of how painful the event is. The Guilty Remnant is almost like the personification of grief in this regard, as they linger silently, reminding characters of their grief and loss. And something else that can be sort of explored with grief as a character wound is the grief-inspired split. between characters. And the sudden departure that happens in The Leftovers inspires many grief-induced splits. Kevin and Laureen's divorce begins when Laureen decides to go and join the Guilty Remnant, resulting in neither of them being able to discuss or talk about their shared grief. And grief is a complex thing. There are many different angles on a literary level that we can take it, exploring this very emotional response. Grief does make for a very powerful and relatable character wound, often providing a very compelling motive and justification for action or lack thereof. People may turn to the spiritual or supernatural as a means of coping with their grief, or others might deny and even package away their grief, unwilling to discuss or acknowledge it. And then others may be paralyzed, unable to move on or heal. All of which make for compelling stories and motives. They create an intense complexity to a character surrounding an event or another character in general. A big part, however, in dealing with grief and incorporating it as a character wound or a character ghost is making it authentic and relatable. Cheap tricks have often been used to garner sympathy surrounding grief or a grieving character, but try to avoid these. Characters don't have to be real people because at the end of the day, they're just characters in a story. But the emotions that you're exploring and that you're incorporating should be real. And also, when it comes to grief, there needs to be a balancing effect. Think of it a bit like a roller coaster, where there are moments of intense grief or even pain. There should also be cathartic moments. Part of what makes grief effective in fiction is for the cathartic payoff. Finding happiness and joy in all of the sadness is such an understated mechanism for gaining emotional investment from your audience. The Leftovers does this over and over again, and I love it and hate it for that exact reason. Despite the utter and crushing sadness in some of the scenes and moments, they are met with these little glimmers of cathartic release and happiness and joy. There are moments that make you cry, not because of them being sad, but because of the sheer happiness that comes after it. Because in The Leftovers, these characters are learning how to move on and let go and repair this ruptured world one person at a time, each individual action and moment of grief is met with an entirely sympathetic understanding. And grief should work that way. We should look to create that emotional bond over an event or another character, and the audience should feel that. Grief is a powerful tool in terms of writing and storytelling. It is a device that has been used time and time again to explore the human condition, as well as act as a meaningful arc. Grief and suffering are universally recognized and can be used across a whole host of characters. But grief isn't the only thing that our characters can feel when considering our character wound or our character ghost. Interested in learning about the next one on our list? Check it out here.